Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners.
Yes, hello.
We are feeling good because we wrapped up our 4-part series on hope. And, the purpose of this podcast is for us to know more about the challenges facing children and families so that no child continues to face abuse, neglect, or trauma. And so sometimes we have to talk about some tough subjects, but I think spending the last 4 weeks and 4 episodes focusing on hope was really, really refreshing.
Oh, it was. And it was a great reminder that it's up to us as the caring adults in children's lives to build hope. It's a protective factor for kids. It will help create resilience and protect them from the harmful social, emotional, and mental impacts of trauma.
Yeah. And ideally, someone's home is their safe space where they can regroup from just the stress of the world and everyday life.
Right. But for some children, their homes aren't safe. They're not stable. They're not calm. And so home can be a stressful place. And that's true for Jackson, who I wanted to tell us Jackson's story today.
Okay.
He's a tween, that fun age, right between child and adult. And he was not attending school. And so his truancy and some concerns that he may need court-ordered services are what brought him before a judge. And then that judge appointed CASA to his case.
And I'm going to guess that this is what we call a CHINS case.
Right.
And so what that means in the judicial system is that these are motions for children that are in need of services, or that S can also stand for supervision as well.
That's right. And so Jackson was avoiding school. Okay. I mean, he just flat out wasn't going.
Right.
And the assumption was that something about school was like causing him anxiety.
Sure.
And so the advocate recommended that he undergo a mental health evaluation and then also participate in some services like mentoring.
Yeah, and I think those steps make a lot of sense to me, just kind of hearing this story. I definitely feel for Jackson. I mean, I think it's challenging to feel stressed about something that, you're going to day after day.
Right.
And, avoiding school, of course, then is probably leading to confrontations with his caregiver. Then you've got the challenge of then adding in just all of the overriding stress over the whole circumstance.
Right. And it just builds upon itself. Yeah. And listener, you and your family and the kids in your life may or may not have the same type of stress, or maybe I would say the same level of stress.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we can all step back and say we have some type of stress in our life, right?
I mean, and it's hard not to. I mean, I think the world feels stressed. Adults feel it, families feel it, and kids then absolutely feel it too because they're, absorbing it. So I think it's also easy for us to underestimate probably how much they're noticing or absorbing that stress in day-to-day life.
That's so true. And one of the most important things we hear from experts that work with youth is that stress isn't just personal for the child, it's collective stress.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that kids aren't only reacting to what's happening like directly to them.
Right.
They're also picking up on the emotional tone of the adults in their life and kind of what's going on in the world.
No, well, and we talk about this that children don't always have words, right? So they can't necessarily put those feelings into words, but they can sense, tension from adults. They are hearing the news stories if they're just on in the background. They're seeing social media posts, and they're probably just noticing and picking up on when the people in their lives around them are acting differently or acting stressed.
Oh, for sure. And kids are navigating exposure to scary stories, right? The things that they're hearing. And they're also navigating just the everyday challenges of growing up. And that's a lot for their little young brains to process.
Yeah, and we've certainly talked about the science of brains and stress before, but for kids, that we serve, so the kids that CASA serves, that stress can often be even more layered. So they're navigating major trauma that could be abuse or neglect. And, then you add on compounding issues, major life changes like moving, new schools, changes in placements, or the loss of something that's been familiar to them, right?
Right. And regardless of what's going on or what type of stress it is, I think we need to pause as adults and remember that kids aren't just going to stop and say, hey, I'm stressed.
Right. Right. Again, they don't have the words.
Right.
But I think it can manifest in their behaviors. And so that could be they're irritable,
Mm-hmm.
they're withdrawn, they might have trouble concentrating in school, or they're not sleeping well, or their behavior changes and they're just acting out in a totally different way.
Yeah. And sometimes, we see these behaviors and we're thinking, why are they being so difficult?
Right.
Or why
Right.
aren't they listening to me? Or whatever
Right.
it may be. But the better question might be, what stress are they carrying right now?
Yeah, and that makes me think we've definitely plugged this book before.
Oh, we have. I know what you're going to say.
It's the Oprah Winfrey book that we love.
It's called What Happened to
What
You,
Happened to You,
right?
yes.
It's the one that she co-authored
Right.
with Dr. Bruce Perry.
Which is so good. And I think it's really just the premise of it very simply is, instead of asking or just thinking something is wrong with someone, right? What's wrong with you? We really should take a step back or pause and say, well, maybe what has happened, to you when trying to understand just trauma behaviors. And
Sure.
it's a good reminder. We should probably put a link in our
Yeah,
show notes, Kristen.
I
on
will
that.
totally do
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
And these questions that Oprah posed and we're talking about are leading us right into what I was hoping we would talk about today, which is that conversations about stress matter.
Yeah, and conversations with kids can be really, really powerful if they're done well.
Yeah, and just initiating a conversation shows kids that stress is normal. Like we're all feeling this. This is something that we can talk about.
Right, and then they're not alone. 'Cause
Exactly.
someone else in their life is also stressed.
Yeah, which every child wants to know they're not on their own.
Yes.
And what I love about starting conversations about stress with children is that it helps them build an emotional language, right? When a child learns to name feelings like worry or anger, confusion, sadness, they then gain tools for managing those emotions because they've identified them. So it feels less overwhelming.
Exactly. And as they identify and can start to learn to name those emotions, then we can, recognize that we don't have to fix everything.
Right.
Sometimes the best thing that we can do is listen and say that we're proud that they're able to share with us how they feel.
Exactly. And when children feel heard, their nervous system actually begins to calm.
Right.
And that's something psychologists call co-regulation. When a calm, supportive adult helps a child regulate their emotions just by being there with them, right?
Yeah.
By listening, by being a calming presence.
Yeah. And so, listener, I hope that we can all sort of pause and say, yeah, we are in agreement that conversations with kids about stress are important.
Right.
So what we'd really like to talk about is how do we actually do this?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What does it look like to have a supportive conversation with kids about stress and how they're feeling?
Yeah. And I would say the first thing to start with is just curiosity.
Yeah. And I think you got to be authentic in that,
Yeah.
Like, just
Definitely.
how, because kids know when you're
not
when you're faking
actually
it.
listening and when you're faking
That's
it. And you don't want to lead off a conversation with some sort of assumption.
Yeah.
You want to ask more of an open-ended question, right? Like, have you noticed anything lately that feels stressful? Or what's been on your mind this week?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of open-ended questions because they don't then lead automatically kids or
Right.
anyone, right, in their response. Instead, it really gives the space for kids to think about the answers and frankly, their own authentic personal answers.
Sure. And then, as they're responding, we want to then validate what they're feeling, right? So even if the stressor seems like something really small to us, it's real to them.
Right.
And so saying something like, that sounds really hard, as simple as that statement is, it can go a long way.
It can, and that goes to, we all want to feel validated,
Yes.
right? So an adult is then saying, I hear you. And that feels hard. And then we want to then figure out a way to move past that and make sense of what they're seeing or feeling in their life.
Yeah. And that may be in terms of whatever specific stressor or issue they're facing.
Right.
Or it may be something bigger, like stress they're feeling after seeing some sort of news story.
Right. And, we sort of alluded to this, but the news, social media, these heated grown-up conversations, politics, they can make things feel bigger and scarier than they may actually be, but that's because it's the child's brain that's interpreting it.
Yes,
right?
yes. And if you're not directly talking to them about the
Right.
things, their brains kind of run with whatever the story is.
Absolutely.
And this is where I'd say it's okay and maybe even recommended to set limits around media exposure.
Yeah.
Kids don't need constant updates about every global crisis.
Nor do
right?
I.
Right.
Just be honest. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think it's good for just sort of the mental health and just the stress of it all. The just what's going on in the world and who's responsible for trying to fix
yes,
it.
and if
right?
we as adults feel like we can't quite handle
Right.
it, how can their little brains possibly handle it?
Definitely. And so, when I think about trying to engage in more conversations like these that are productive, a suggestion I would have is creating predictable routines, right?
Okay.
Consistency, structure, but regular meals, sleep schedules, moments to check in that then kids can expect it's going to happen. I think that can really help children feel safe and feel more grounded.
Agreed. And then if you do have a predictable routine like that, it's really simple to then build in times to do these check-ins and have these conversations.
Right.
The predictability might even encourage conversations because children know like when the time that they're going to be downtime with you is coming.
Right.
And so they know that they're going to have an opportunity to talk with you. And so they might even like think in advance about what they want to talk to you about.
No, that's a really good point. And so I think then the last tip that I would give is just to remind children that the stress that they're feeling in that moment, is in the moment and it's not going to last forever.
Right. This won't last forever, 100%. But while we're feeling this stress, we have to talk about how can we cope with it,
Correct.
right? And then you can talk through and model healthy coping strategies with the children. And that might be, deep breathing or going outside, drawing, journaling, and talking.
Yeah. And I think teaching coping skills helps children in the present, but then it also gives them some tools for the future. Because I think that's a great thing. Because let's be real, stress is never going to totally go away.
Never,
and it's gonna pop up, at another time.
At all the worst times,
all
right?
The worst times.
And stress was definitely not going away for Jackson, who I wanted to finish telling us about. So Jackson, if you remember, I mentioned at the start of this episode, and remember he was avoiding school, right?
Yep.
And so his advocate discovered that he wasn't stressed about something at school, which is what everyone had assumed. He was actually stressed about leaving his caregiver at home alone when he went to school.
Okay. Well, there's a great example that we shouldn't make assumptions, right? And assume that we know what the problem is, even though everyone thought that the problem was actually related to his attendance at school.
Right. And so apparently there were some dynamics and problems at home that made him scared to leave his caregiver alone each day. And that's why he was stressed. Home wasn't a safe place. School was. He knew that. But going to school was, in essence, leaving someone else behind in that unsafe home. And that was the source of his worry.
Which I can understand that. I can, understand that would feel like a lot for a tween to carry.
Yeah, definitely.
So in this situation, he was appointed an advocate. So how did the advocate help Jackson?
Sure. So Jackson's advocate helped connect his caregiver to some resources that kind of stabilized her a bit. And at the same time, they started engaging in healthy conversations so that Jackson could share his fears, kind of be heard. And then together they created routines that made him feel more comfortable leaving her. Like there was someone was aware and they were setting up kind of how the day would run, and he felt better leaving her behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so glad that he had an advocate, who could really identify that core issue. And I mean, I hope that his home life continues to improve so that he can gain that healthy level of independence and feel more secure when he leaves the home.
Definitely. And he's on the right track, right?
That's great. So, listener, as we wrap up today's episode, here's our invitation to you. Think about the children that are in your life. Maybe it's your own child, a grandchild, a student, a neighbor, just anyone in your life, and maybe take a few minutes and ask them a simple question. Not just how are you doing, but maybe what's been on your mind lately.
Yeah. And after you ask, sit back and listen, right? Be present, be curious, and let them know that you care about every single little word coming out of their mouth.
And I think that's really because sometimes the most powerful support that we can offer a child is simply having a conversation.
Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casas' podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.